The truth doesn't whisper anymore. It's screaming, and it has a name, a face, and a DNA report that just blew the Sussex narrative into pieces. For years, every rumor circled the same unanswered question. What happened before the fame? Before the carefully curated speeches? Before the royal fairy tale? Before the humanitarian branding machine kicked into overdrive? There was always a missing chapter. A stretch of time scrubbed clean, a silence so deliberate it felt engineered. And now that silence has cracked wide open. Because this is no longer about speculation, leaked emails, or blurry photos buried on obscure forums. This is biology. This is documentation. This is a 29-year-old woman stepping out of the shadows with proof that rewrites everything. Her name is Sarah, and according to court-admissible DNA results released by her legal team, she is the biological daughter of Meghan Markle and Joe Guiliano. A child allegedly born, hidden, and erased decades before the world ever learned the Duchess's name, Joe Guiliano's secret daughter. Let that land. Not a rumor, not an anonymous source, not a disgruntled ex, a living human being, nearly 3 decades old, presenting a genetic probability of parentage listed at 99.9%. This isn't gossip anymore. This is an existential threat to a brand built on compassion, motherhood, and moral superiority. The first line of defense will be denial, so let's address the math before the spin doctors try to blur it. Sarah is 29 years old. That places her birth squarely in the mid-1990s, long before Suits, long before royal palaces, and long before the world stage. It lands directly in a period of Meghan's life that has always felt oddly incomplete. Years marked by sudden absences, vague explanations, and missing records that never quite added up. Sarah says those gaps weren't academic detours or innocent travel. She says they were cover. And this morning, her legal team stopped hinting and started publishing. They didn't ask for money. They didn't demand a settlement. They didn't request privacy. They released the DNA. In one move, they forced a confrontation no PR firm can smooth over. Science doesn't negotiate. Biology doesn't issue retractions. And no amount of reputation management can rewrite genetic code. Picture the scene unfolding behind closed doors right now. Phones buzzing, lawyers scrambling, a narrative control operation collapsing in real time because this is the one thing Meghan Markle has never been able to manage. A grown woman with nothing left to lose, asking why she was abandoned while her mother built an image as the world's most vocal advocate for family and empathy. Sarah's words cut deeper than any tabloid headline ever could. She describes a lifetime of displacement, growing up with unanswered questions, watching her biological mother rise on television, then ascend to global royalty, preaching values that never reached her. She waited. She stayed silent. She watched the wedding like the rest of the world. The white dress, the sermons about love, the declarations of unity, while knowing she was the secret that could shatter it all. I didn't want to hurt her, Sarah says, but I realized I didn't exist in her world, even though I exist in the real one. That single sentence dismantles years of image crafting. And then there's Joe Guiliano. For decades, his name floated like a ghost, always mentioned, never examined. A shadowy figure from Meghan's early years, dismissed as irrelevant, quietly erased from the official storyline that insisted her first serious relationship began much later. But people who knew them back then tell a different story. One of intensity, emotional entanglement, and a relationship that spiraled fast, then vanished. If Sarah's account is accurate, Joe didn't disappear. He was silenced. The allegation is devastating. A pregnancy deemed incompatible with ambition, managed behind the scenes, with decisions made swiftly and quietly to preserve a future that couldn't accommodate a baby. Sarah claims she was placed into a closed arrangement, not abandoned to chance, but strategically hidden, monitored from a distance, close enough to control, far enough to deny. And here's where the story shifts from scandal to pattern. Because abandonment, according to those who have followed this saga for years, is not an anomaly. It's a theme. The estranged father, the discarded friends, the scorched earth exits. Sarah's emergence reframes all of it, not as coincidence, but as methodology. Which brings us to the most dangerous question of all. Where does Prince Harry fit into this? Did he know? Was this disclosed in private, buried under reassurances, framed as ancient history? Or was it concealed entirely? One more truth withheld in the name of image preservation. If Harry didn't know, then this revelation isn't just humiliating, it's catastrophic. He has staked his identity on protecting his wife from what he framed as cruelty and lies. If the truth proves the opposite, then his moral crusade collapses overnight. And if he did know, then he isn't a victim of deception, he's a participant in it. Sarah's legal team is already signaling there's more to come: affidavits, documentation, sworn statements that suggest irregularities surrounding her early placement and long-term silence. They're daring a response. They're inviting legal scrutiny. They're essentially saying, if this isn't true, prove it. So far, the silence has been deafening. Mainstream media outlets haven't touched the story, not because it lacks substance, but because it carries legal and reputational nuclear fallout. This isn't a claim you can dismiss with a statement. It demands evidence in return. And evidence is exactly what Sarah says she has. Photos are already circulating in private spaces. Images that reportedly show an uncanny resemblance. The eyes, the freckles, the bone structure, a reflection of a younger Meghan, stripped of polish, hardened by rejection rather than fame. Sarah says she tried to reach out privately. Letters, emails, attempts to connect before the wedding, before the brand solidified, before it became impossible. She says the response was silence, returned letters letters, blocked numbers, not ignorance, refusal. That detail alone obliterates the compassion narrative. This wasn't a lost connection. It was an active erasure. And now, the erased has spoken. This is no longer about gossip. It's about exposure, about a truth that waited nearly 30 years for oxygen and now refuses to be suffocated again. Because this is only the beginning. The most dangerous lies aren't the ones spoken out loud. They're the ones buried so deep everyone forgets to look for them. Because once Sarah's DNA results detonated, the conversation stopped being emotional and started becoming forensic. Timelines, records, disappearances, patterns that don't exist in isolation but line up with unsettling precision. Let's go back to the years no one likes to talk about, mid to late 1990s. In the official narrative, this was a clean stretch. School, ambition, theater, preparation for greatness. But former classmates remember something else entirely. A sudden vanishing act. A bright, socially visible teenager abruptly gone for months at a time. Explanations offered but never examined. Family issues, study opportunities, vague, unprovable excuses that, in that era, were the standard camouflage for a teenage pregnancy. Sarah's legal team claims this wasn't coincidence. They allege Meghan was quietly relocated, away from familiar eyes, placed into a private environment designed for secrecy, not education. A controlled space where a problem could be managed without derailing a future carefully mapped out in advance. And here's where the story tightens like a noose, because secrets like this don't survive without architects. Sarah's narrative points to a central figure, not silent, not passive, but decisive. A mother who understood optics, understood sacrifice, and understood that a baby didn't fit the plan. The allegation is blunt. The solution wasn't accidental. It was engineered. Doctors coordinated, location selected, silence enforced, and Joe Guiliano, he wasn't erased because he didn't care. He was erased because he mattered too much. According to accounts now emerging, Joe was young, emotionally invested, and suddenly facing a machine far bigger than himself. Families involved, legal language introduced early, fear weaponized. The message allegedly delivered was simple and devastating. Speak and you destroy everything. Her future, your life, the child's stability. So he complied, not because he was weak, but because he was told it was the only way to protect his daughter. For decades, he held the line. No interviews, no tell-alls, no leaks. While the woman he loved rebranded herself as a victim of media cruelty, he lived with the knowledge that the loudest truth of all was locked inside him. But time breaks silence. And Sarah, growing up, watching interviews, watching speeches, watching her mother frame herself as the embodiment of compassion, became unbearable. This is where the alleged NDA enters the picture. Not a casual agreement, but a formal pact dating back to the late 1990s. A promise extracted under emotional pressure, binding families into mutual silence. But NDAs are fragile things. They crack when the welfare of a child is questioned. They crumble when the hidden becomes human. And Sarah is no longer a secret. She's an adult with a voice, a lawyer, and proof. What makes this revelation radioactive isn't just the existence of a daughter. It's the behavior that followed. Sarah claims she tried to make contact long before this became public. Letters sent quietly, messages routed through official channels. Attempts to reach out not for money, not for attention, but for acknowledgement. The response wasn't confusion, it was nothing. Blocked communication, returned mail, total stonewalling. That silence isn't ignorance, it's choice, and choice exposes character. Now place this against the backdrop of Meghan's public messaging. Speeches about kindness, podcasts about trauma, interviews centered on motherhood and healing. The contrast is jarring, because while one child was being presented to the world as a symbol of hope, another was being treated as a liability to be erased. Which brings us to the royal vetting. This is where the stakes escalate beyond celebrity scandal. No one marries into that institution without scrutiny that borders on obsession. Background checks aren't polite inquiries. They're excavations, records examined, relationships traced, gaps investigated. The idea that a biological child simply slipped through unnoticed strains credibility, so either the truth was missed or it was found and contained. And if it was contained, then this wasn't just personal deception, it was institutional compromise. Imagine the calculus. Expose the truth and trigger a constitutional disaster. Cancel the wedding and humiliate a prince. Or bury the file, suppress the fallout, and hope time does what silence always hopes it will do. Erase memory. If that decision was made, it explains everything that followed. The tension, the hostility, the paranoia. The sudden exit framed as liberation but possibly motivated by fear. Because once the truth is documented, it becomes leverage. And leverage breeds resentment. Sarah's emergence suggests the leverage failed, because biology doesn't stay buried. And now, the legal implications loom larger than any interview ever could. Under California law, a biological child isn't erased simply because she was inconvenient. If parental rights weren't terminated cleanly, and Sarah's lawyers are openly disputing that, then inheritance, support, and accountability come roaring back into play. This isn't symbolic, this is financial. Years of wealth accumulation, media deals, intellectual property, a carefully built estate intended for 2 heirs suddenly facing a third, one denied recognition for nearly 3 decades. The emotional damage alone is incalculable. And then there's Harry. Reports suggest distance, physical separation, silence where there used to be choreography. If he didn't know, then the betrayal is absolute. Every bridge burned, every accusation leveled at his family, now reframed through a single horrifying realization. He defended a narrative that may have been built on a mission, and if he did know, then his moral outrage was performance. and the mask is slipping. Sarah's response to recent outreach attempts says everything. No private meetings, no NDAs, no quiet reconciliation designed to neutralize her voice. Her position is devastatingly simple. She doesn't want a payoff. She wants the truth acknowledged publicly, because acknowledgement is the one thing money can't replace. Behind the scenes, the fallout is already rippling outward. Invitations drying up, endorsements reconsidered, allies recalculating risk, silence where there used to be defense. Hollywood doesn't do loyalty. It does survival. And Sarah, she becomes the unavoidable center of gravity, not because she asked for fame, but because truth attracts attention, the way lies attract protection. Her story isn't aspirational, it's inconvenient, and that's precisely why it resonates. This didn't have to end like this. There was a path where honesty led to redemption, where accountability transformed the narrative, where a difficult truth became a human one. Instead, the lie was chosen, and lies don't age well. They harden, they metastasize, and eventually they confront the one thing they can't silence, the person they tried to erase. The House of Sussex wasn't destabilized by critics, tabloids, or palace politics. It was undone by biology. And Sarah, once hidden, once denied, now stands as the proof that some truths don't wait forever. They wait until they're strong enough to speak.